Hey everybody, how's it going? So welcome to Reigate Lake, welcome back to Reel Up My Park from scratch. This is episode number 8, if you can believe we've made it to episode 8. So we're in that final run now of getting it ready for the workshop. So we're sort of putting all of the final touches together for the area, and we're starting to bring all of the stuff back to life. And in the last episode, then, we were dealing with this, the SLC that the park probably really didn't want. They just invested in it because it was cheap, easy, and quite nasty. So this is what we ended up with. Here we are with Gold Rush, and actually, it was quite a well-received episode. So thank you all for coming along. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for your new subscriptions. Thank you for the comments, your likes. Like I say, you guys are really driving this project and this park, and I really, really do love having every single one of you come along for the journey. So thank you so much. So if you're brand new to the whole series, this is Reigate Lake. This is the theme park that we're building in Planet Coaster. It's a super realistic park. We are literally taking realism to the nth degree now that TMTK items, theme makers, toolkit items on the workshop are just insanely incredible. And it feels like we need to do some justice to the idea of realism in Planet Coaster. And that's what we're doing here. So we've spent 8 or 7 episodes so far. We're on the 8th building this whole park. So enjoy going back and watching those. And if you are actually picking up from episode 7, then we are on episode 8, and here we go. So we're getting ready for putting this onto the actual workshop so that you guys can see the actual park and how it's coming together and how it's been pulled together, and you can see all of the tips, tricks and secrets that and the misdemeanors to pathing that I've done all along the way. So we're focusing on our western themed area for now. So in the last couple of episodes we built our log flume, we built our SLC, we've done the bits in the middle, and now we just need to sort of finish it off in this area. And today we're going from a coaster that the park probably really don't care about. It's there because it's there. It's an SLC. It's really uninspired. It's unimaginative. Everyone's got one. It's just how you dress it up. Like, you can polish a turd. Well, sorry, you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. This is the principle that we're going on here with the SLC. And we're shifting our focus from that polished turd right to a coaster that the park absolutely would have wanted, because back at the time that they were around, they would have been the pioneering roller coasters. They would have been the future of roller coasters. Turns out they weren't. Spoiler alert. But stand-up coasters back in the 90s were the thing to have. It was like this brand new technology, this brand new experience, this brand new thing that was coming onto the market, and so parks were starting to invest in them. So over here in the UK, we've got a roller coaster called Shockwave at Drayton Manor. Very, very good roller coaster, but it's very simple, because it's one of the first stand-up coasters. Think along the lines of how Oblivion at Alton Towers, Air at Alton Towers are very simplistic versions of models of roller coasters that we've got out there now. So like Flying Dinosaur, for example, is just the absolute next generation of flying coasters, but none of that would have been possible without doing Air first. And then look at the likes of Yukon Striker, the dive coasters, and some of the other smaller dive coasters like Oblivion Black Hole and Valkyrie and I said that right? Valkyrie? Apologies, I've just butchered another ride name. None of those would have been possible without building Oblivion first. So this is the principle that we're going for here. Is it's a stand-up coaster that would have been built just after Shockwave would have been built in Drayton Manor. So it's not the pioneer, it's not the world's first or anything, but it's almost like a generation up from that. It's going to go in this area in some capacity, and I think I'd like to incorporate some kind of terrain change in this area as well, because we changed the terrain over here to come up past the log flume, and it's gone back down to the original level. So I think I'd like to take it up again, but slightly, just because we know that we're coming into a terrain change here as well. Look, so I think I'd like to bring it back up and have some kind of feature of the first element. Anyway, I don't know. I need to plan it. So the reason we're doing a stand-up coaster, by the way, is because we did a vote for what coaster goes into this area. The SLC just won the vote, but it was neck and neck the entire time between the SLC and the stand-up, so it felt only right to honour both of those votes and put both in. That's why we're putting 2 coasters so close together. So anyway, I'm going to carry on building, and I will see you for the first update. Here we are then, we've got ourselves a stand-up coaster, and this is about the 4th iteration of this layout that I've come up with. And I was going for a bit of a mix and mash between Shockwave at Drayton Manor and also the Six Flags Green Lantern coaster as well. I was kind of going for this idea that B&M would have been maturing their designs as they go along. So Drayton Manor would have debuted the first ever stand-up stand-up coaster in its really simplistic form, and they're now starting to develop the technology. It's not as advanced as having things like Immelmann's and those more intricate inversions and layouts that you may find. They're starting to push the boundaries with this, but this still isn't really that spectacular when you compare it to the modern day coasters of today. So we're dealing with a stand-up coaster that would have debuted sort of around the late 90s, early 2000s, just when they were starting to really take off and really start to be a thing. But then, as it turns out, they were dropped pretty quickly because something better and shinier came along from other manufacturers. So this is kind of what we were going for. The park would have invested quite heavily in this model and in this principle that they would then market it, and this would have been almost like the turning point of the park. This would have been their first proper thrill ride that they would have had and properly invested in. So typical layout for a stand-up coaster actually. So you leave the station and you go up the lift hill, which is your standard 30-degree or so lift hill. You have this pre-drop section, and then you go into this like almost a turnaround that's on a bit of a slant. So there's a bit of a helix, but it's not a helix because it comes up to a point and then it goes over a bit of a bunny hop. But you actually reduce the speed at this point, and then it goes into a 56-degree drop. Into the first loop. So this is pretty typical of the stand-up coasters of the early time. It would go into a first loop, and I'm very conscious of the fact that this is now the second coaster we've got out of the three that goes straight into a vertical loop. So it's sort of like a, remember that the Eurofighter would have copied this principle and not the other way around. So even though in chronological order of episodes we're doing this now, the Eurofighter would have copied the loop element of this. Anyway, goes into a loop and then into a 0G roll. Really common. It's the same as Shockwave's first two inversions, so there's precedent set, and it makes sense that B&M and Intamin of the time wouldn't have necessarily been that innovative when it comes to layouts, because they would have wanted to keep the same inversions in the same order because they have to use less research and development time to be able to pull those together. But what we then do is have the turnaround, so that we see this in modern day B&Ms, and we see this on Green Lantern where it sort of swings out to the right and then swings back to the left. And these turnarounds are actually a little bit difficult to do. This took me quite some time to do, because a B&M turnaround sort of goes up really sharply, levels off really sharply, and then you almost pivot the train and turn the train on a point and an axis. It's really quite tight, but then it dives really quickly down into the actual into the drop here. So this is kind of the shaping that I've ended up having. And when I was smoothing this out in the actual game, this, as the autosave kicks in, this kind of, it needed banking. So you lose all of the banking, you end up with far too many laterals, and you end up with a non-realistic looking drop. And so what I've ended up having to do here is just to bank this a little bit further than I would normally have banked it, and then allowed the game to sort of unbank it. And actually it comes off with this quite nice little swoopy drop, and the shaping, and it now rides correctly as well. So if you compare this to the Green Lantern turnaround, is actually very, very similar now. So I'm quite pleased with how this has turned out in the last run. By the way, this uses the 4-meter method. Those of you that are familiar with this concept of the 4-meter method is where you build the coaster in 4-meter sections, and then you go backwards and forwards, smoothing the coaster out. And this has had 6 passes rather than the 4, and even now it's still not perfect. Like the 0G roll is not entirely perfect. So anyway, we go into the turnaround drop, and then we go into an airtime hill, and I wanted to put the airtime hill in because I needed a strategy for the path to come out the other side here. So it felt like this would actually be a good place to have the coaster and path interaction where it passes over the top. And then it goes into a corkscrew. So here we go into the first corkscrew, and this would have debuted on Kumba already, this idea of double interlocking corkscrews. So this is already, again, a precedent set that B&M have got. They've already got it in their portfolio. They can just plop it into a ride layout, and they already know how to manufacture it. They already know how to pull it together. So into the first corkscrew, into a turnaround, a real banked turnaround, and then into the second corkscrew. And the one thing I found with looking at all of the stand-up coasters, including the ones that have now been converted to floorless coasters, they peter out towards the end. They don't have much going for them after a couple of real high key elements. So this is what I've kind of done here. It sort of goes into this swoopy, overbanked curve, and then it just comes down, and it's almost like the park have gone, ugh, don't really know how to finish this, so let's just finish it here. And so that's what it's done. It goes into this curve, into the second curve, and then back into the brake run. It's sort of like they've hit this point where they're going, well, I don't really know how we want to finish it off. We don't want to spend too much time doing much more track, so let's just spin it round and you turn it round and whatever. So that's kind of the layout that we've gone for. Rides quite nicely. It feels like it would be a stand-up coaster. Remember, stand-up coasters weren't particularly fast-paced. So whereas you would have a floorless coaster, and a lot of the stand-up coasters being converted to floorless coasters now is kind of the inspiration of this. You could probably make it a floorless coaster, but they wouldn't necessarily be fast at this point. So they would just be, the gimmick here is the stand-up element. You're distracted by the fact that you're standing up on a roller coaster. You don't have to be thrown through constant and relentless inversions for an early stand-up machine. So that's kind of what this is going for. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit drawn out, it's a little bit sort of bit slower paced, but that's what these early stand-up coasters were all about. Being distracted by the fact that you're standing up and not being distracted by the fact you've been thrown through inversions at really high speeds and tight curves and everything. And then the area itself, then I'm just starting to pull together. So I didn't want to put too much effort in terms of shops and everything into this area, because you've got this main plaza area here. So you don't want to be putting too much up here, because you're going to be starting to take away custom from the shops that you've specifically designed to have your high profile and your high throughput shops. So over here I've just put a couple of grab and go stalls, and I've put a couple of vending machines in, and just something to monetize the area in terms of games. And this would then be the area. You just need to decorate it and make the station sort of like a little bit pretty, and it's a bit more of a destination area, but you're going to have a path that comes around this way. You're going to have the train station here, so it's still accessible, but it's set back so it's not in the way of that guest crowd. And remembering back to all of our guest episodes, it's about splitting the crowd out wherever you can. So we've got a convergence point at the bottom here where everybody from the log flume and everybody from the SLC and everything is converging in this one area. How do you split those guests out if they wanted to come over here? Well, you either send them up past the stand-up coaster, or you send them up past the SLC. But either way, they're both going to converge again at the gift shop. So there's that element of splitting the guests out, converging them back together, and when they do converge back together, you've got a really high key retail opportunity sitting here. So this is the layout of the actual coaster itself. Quite nice little profile sitting on the landscape. Don't know what would come on the back here. So I want to do the hotel at some point, and I want that hotel to be in a bit of an L shape along here. So I'm wondering whether this would just be grounds for the hotel, or whether this would actually be a small hidden part of the park where you have some smaller rides and stuff. Don't know how that's going to work out, and sort of need to let that organically happen. So I've left this path next to the drop tower in so that we can have the facility to do that if we want to. Otherwise, the park's going to start developing out this way in future episodes, and then something at the back here, something like rapids or something round the back anyway. So that's the update really. That's the layout of the coaster. It needs a few custom supports just to fill in some gaps, like here for example. It needs bit of custom supporting, and then I also need to sort out the supports because it's still a 4 meter method. It's placing the supports every 4 meters, but you don't need it that frequently, that often. So anyway, I'm going to carry on building, and I will see you for the next update. Okay, so we are a couple of hours later. We've got ourselves a nice little station building. So I've been working on the idea of the backstage and the actual station area itself. So remembering that this is the coaster that the park would have actually wanted to put in, they would have made a little bit of an effort with it, but they would have also still wanted to do it as cheaply as they can, because it was still a risky investment for them. So they wouldn't want to go all guns blazing with something just in case it went wrong. So there's still going to be an element of cost cutting and cheapness involved with this. So it's still going to be quite lightly themed. It's still going to be quite generic, but we're going to be more Western enthused than the other stuff that we've had elsewhere in the area. So this is what we've come up with so far. I've been working on the backstage area, so the actual maintenance shed area itself, and this is what we're looking at now. So obviously we are roofless. I had to do a little bit of work on this last bend. It was just a little bit too close. You could just about reach out and touch the actual walls itself, so I've had to move it aside a little bit, and it's now just out of reach, so outside of the envelope of touchingness. And as you can see, this is where the building was originally. So This is now where it's sitting. So two-story maintenance shed then. So the idea of this one and how it would operate is that you would have like an underneath loading bay. So a van would come in either this side or this side. There's going to be two for this one, depending on where the maintenance is happening and how often it happens. So you'd have like an underneath maintenance bay where everything would be stored. So unlike the other rides that we've got where they all have to be dismantled and taken across park to the warehouse, all of the inspection and everything for this ride would actually be done on site. Slightly cheaper to maintain, slightly cheaper to run. And so that's what would be underneath here. And you would then come up the stairs into almost like an office-y type area. So this one again, it's just a typical maintenance bay. You've just got all of the stuff you'd expect to find. It needs a bit more clutter, it needs a bit more stuff up here. This is just getting a feel for how the area is going to come together. Very industrial in the sense that you've got the fluorescent strips and everything that are coming across the top here, and you've got the industrial beams. So it's almost like we're saying it's a wooden facade on the outside, but actually on the inside it's a steel beam. It's pretty solid against all of the elements, especially the British winter weather that we get, where it just rains solidly. Started to get a feel for the outside here then. So again, I need to just do the fine TMTK details and everything. It needs electric boxes and it needs all sorts of cabling and stuff along here. But I'm just starting to get a feel for how you would operate the actual transfer track, and the transfer track itself is now pretty much in place. It's got the runners, and it's got all of the pillars and the supports and the girders and everything, and then there's the cable underneath. So I just need to finish off how this is going to look later on in the detailing phase, but for now I'm sort of quite happy with how this is sitting. It sits quite nicely on the landscape as well. It's not too intrusive. It's sort of set away from everything. It's set away from the queue line. It's just there. The only real thing is the fact that this comes round the side here, and you had this almost like touch point. So that's pretty much my only concern with it. So, but if you look at the train coming around the corner now, you can see just about not touch it. And I've checked it using the in-game beams and everything, so it's out of reach of the 1 meter beam. So it's good. It's good to go. Just about. So the station area then is coming on quite nicely. So I wanted this idea of having an open station because we've done a closed station with both the SLC and also the log flume, so it felt like this needed to be a bit of an open station, and I wanted it to be this brick and wood effect. And it's pretty common that you find this with westerny type areas, that you would mix up this rough stone with the actual idea of wood panelling. And I wanted a slat panelling because we've used it elsewhere, right? So we've used it everywhere else in the western area, so it felt like it should be right that we drag this across here as well. But I didn't want to use the same one because, you know, it just gets boring and repetitive. So what I did, I found the what they call the pallets from the Studios pack, and I just recolored it and stacked it against the wall, and it gives this awesome like dappled palette or dappled wood effect. So I've seen this quite a lot in theme parks actually. There's a couple of rides that I've sort of been sat in the queue thinking, oh, that's quite a nice little wood effect, but if I look through the gaps I can see inside, I can see all of the internal goblins. No, I'm not going to detail the inside, so I don't think it's going to go that extreme, unless of course you guys want me to. Because you would find electric cupboards and all sorts underneath the station here. You would have an access point. So you definitely would have all of that underneath the station. So anyway, I wanted this idea that you could potentially peek through the wood slats and see inside, but at the same time you can't because it's actually quite tall. So if you look like at the height of the brickwork, it's actually taller than you are, but you can still see the light dappling through. So I just wanted that effect from the actual queue line itself, just to give that sort of lighting effect, and it looks really good. Quite like how it's turned out. And then with the wood beams and everything, at the moment it's taking on a bit of an Africa theme because I've used the TMTK fence for this trim, and it looks a little bit sort of zebra-like, doesn't it? It looks a bit African themed, but it will look Western. And then I'm just starting the framework within the station as well, so I'm just starting to get a feel for how the actual station is going to be put together, how it's going to be supported, and this is sort of where I'm going to come up with now, or what I've come up with now. And I just need to add the details, so it needs some lighting and it needs all of the extra stuff in here. So it needs the railing and the fence, and it needs some kind of topper along here just to run off the actual station itself. It needs all of its say signage and electric cupboards, and it needs some cabling underneath the station. So all of that fine detail still needs doing. I was just getting a feel for how it's going to sit on the landscape and how it was going to be sort of there. And I wanted this idea of a slightly overhanging roof, and because this side is the queue, one side had to overhang more than the other, and I didn't know how it was going to be sort of looking symmetrically. But actually, when you think that you're standing at this angle, it hides the fact that one side is longer than the other or wider than the other because of forced perspective. So actually that's turned out quite nicely. The other thing I've started to do then is to plan how we're going to get our disabled guests into this ride, because I was toying with this one because wheelchair users typically wouldn't use a stand-up coaster. So logically speaking, you would say, actually, I don't need to worry about disabled access. But no, you do. You do need to worry about that because, yes, your wheelchair users might not use this, but anybody who struggles with motion would still be entitled to use the disabled lift and would still be entitled to ride the ride. And plus, remember as well, a wheelchair user still has the right to choose whether they actually ride the ride or not. And it would be discussed on an as and when basis as to whether it would be appropriate for them to ride, but they still have the choice that if they want to, then they should be allowed to. So that's what we're doing here. We're building in the whole disabled lift just so that it comes up. Now, I can't do anything with the actual barriers that are in game, so this is going to need to be one of those squint and pretend moments, pretend that this is an open space, because there's nowhere else that you can put this lift that would actually be feasible. You could put it on the exit ramp here and have it coming up this way, or you could have it over here, but then you've got how you're going to get round. And if you did have it on this side, then you still got the problem of getting up this slight ramp as well. So it's like, actually, this is probably the most appropriate place to put it. This is probably the most appropriate place to actually have it in here, but I may change my mind as we're going along. I'm still not sold on this idea. I need to design the size of the lift and everything as it is anyway. So that's it for this update, really. It's sitting quite nicely there on the sight line, and guests are actually using it. The stand-up coasters are a little bit more popular than I actually gave them credit for, actually, if I'm honest. I didn't think in game they were actually that popular. So anyway, I'm going to carry on building and I'll see you for the next update. So spoiler alert time, the ride is called Outlaw Fury and it's going to be everywhere in this update because I've started to put the ride logos and everything in all the places, and this is probably the penultimate update, so this is the one just before all of the fine detailing that brings everything to life. I sort of got a little bit carried away with the detailing of the station and then some of the shop areas because I wanted to make sure that the area was going to come together as an area to make sure that it felt right. And I also, before I do the final bit, I also want to do a holistic view as well and make sure that the area is as fluid as I want it to be, making sure that the guest flow is as it should be and making sure that all the monetization options are there. So I wanted to sort of take a moment just to take a step back and say, actually, I'm not going to focus on this entire detail just yet. I'm going to focus on the western area itself and how it sits in the whole park. And actually, it's sitting quite nicely. So especially when you compare it to the size of like the front entrance, this is sort of like the western area. I think we just need to think about how I'm going to get people around the back here. This is going to be a consideration for the future, and I also think I need to start considering how this area is going to start looking. But I think this is going to be in the cleanup episode before we release it to Steam. So because the train station needs to come in here somewhere, and I need to have a bit of a strategy for that. So anyway, this is what I've been doing in the meantime then. So I still need to do some final detailings. Like, I haven't removed the unnecessary supports and stuff from this coaster yet, so it's still a bit of a mess of metal. So that's going to get sorted out. But the station is pretty much finished. I've got everything in here now that I think I'm going to do. It's going to have its final pass, obviously, just to make sure that everything is as it should be. But all of the fencing for the queues are now done. And so I've had to use pretty typical British health and safety laws on this one, remembering that this is actually a balcony and people are going to be standing. They're not going to be moving through the area, they're going to be standing. You've got the risk of people people climbing on the fences and falling off and stuff. So this makes me nervous. And with my UK head on, this sort of doesn't feel right. It feels like it should be enclosed or netted off or something, but I've seen some other pretty high roller coaster stations that have got this kind of principle to it, so there's precedent set for it. It just makes me nervous that this is this thing. But anyway, Fences are all done for the queues, so I just need to put down all of the queue padding, and I wanted to show you this just before I did all of that, because as you know, this all comes to life, and then the vegetation and everything will start to create that dappled shade. So remember, no queue covers, so just nature. And that's what we're going to do. There's going to be loads of trees and everything around here, and obviously this is going to need to be obscured at some point, and we still have this massive space. Still don't know what we're going to do with this area. And then I've also started to do the final details of the actual maintenance shed, so not much has changed from the last update. I've just added a few other random bits of detailing and everything all along the way, and the biggest one being the roof. We've now got a roof, so it's now just this corrugated roof. It comes across quite nicely actually. The skylight, just to look in, again, vanity thing more than anything else, more than functionality, just so that you can see in from the top and you can actually see that there's a thing inside that we've taken the effort to detail. So let's actually see what's on the inside. Started to think about how this road then would connect to the main plaza area, and I kind of figured that actually it would connect here and it would have a bit of a staff plaza area, and I wanted to keep this open as well, probably put some bollards or something along here, or the gate from the railway line along here, but it felt like this area would probably be open and you'd have some kind of backstage or staff area to get into these kitchens and whatever. So I've actually put a staff room in the back here just to make this area a little bit functional, so you can see this staff coming in and out and everything. And we've got bandits, so this is now continuing the same building thing that we had with the station, with the pointy roof and the wood and this slatty effect that makes it look a little bit more African than it does Western. But I like it actually, because now it's everywhere. It actually comes together quite nicely. Right, whereas it was just the station, it felt like it was just a little bit pointed out in the middle of nowhere, and it had no real purpose. But now this area has purpose in that sense, because all of the roofing has this same slatty effect, so it comes across quite nicely. Slatty, that's a good word. We should use that more often. And so yeah, this just needs its TMTK finite details, you know, things like the clutter and the coffee cups and stuff, so that's all fine. But this is essentially how this is now going to look. It's just got this very simple bandits style, very boxy, we just put it here because our roller coaster is here, rather than actually making an effort. Remember, the main food area is down here, the other side of the western area, so this is just a grab and go. This isn't meant to be anything special. Your main food area, where you've put all of the effort into the design, is down by the log flume, so that's where you want people to go. That's where you want people to sit down to enjoy the environment they're in, etc. This is just the facility to monetize the area and throw food at people as they leave a ride. And then you've just got the Outlaw Fury on-ride photo booth, so it needs its staff and it needs its photos and everything, but this is pretty much a typical setup for your photo booth. So I need to put the flooring and stuff in, but you know, you've got all of your screens along here and just your clutter and everything, your office space style stuff, your IKEA boxes that you've got all along here. You've got your filing cabinets and stuff. Just need to put the monitors on the front, ride photos, staff, and a floor, and then that's pretty much done. I mean, you've seen this before, it's your pretty typical on-ride photo setup, but again, it's just using that same style, it's using that pointed roof, it's using that, like, slatty style, and beams, slatty and beams. It's the theme of this episode, should be the title. And then I've just used the same effect as well. These are just the what they call pallets for the walls, and I really like how this turns out actually with the pallets. It makes it look really good. But can you imagine working in here in the winter with the wind and the rain going through here? Oh, no thanks. That would just be awful. So anyway, then you've just got the refresh as well. I think this is probably a bit too intense for somewhere where you've got some vending machines that are barely used. But again, I just wanted to incorporate this sort of slatty. Take a shot. Every time I say slatty, take a shot. This fence that's in there, and it only comes in one size as far as I can see on the workshop, so I kind of had to work with the size. You can't really replicate it for your own good. Like, you don't have this piece to be able to make a shorter version, not like the fences here where you can make a shorter version because there's shorter pieces that you can create. So this is probably a bit overkill in terms of building, but actually I think it fits quite nicely. Again, it just draws the area together. You've just got a bit of a consistent theme going on here. I've started then to also outline where I want some of the concrete pathing to go. So this is going to be a pad. And then I've also decided to move the disabled access as well. I kind of figured that the disabled access would need to be by the exit of the ride, not the entrance of the ride, because you're going to start bothering people that are trying to enter the queue if you've got a wheelchair access person trying to get into the actual station itself from this point. So I've moved it so that it's out of the way here. Just need to put all of this together, make sure that it's as I want it to be. And I kind of figured as well that this ramp here wouldn't be too much of an issue, because it's the right angle. So it's not a step, it's not a steep slope. It's enough that a wheelchair user would be able to get up to the exit, and they would probably be assisted by a member of staff at this point anyway. They would have come up and they would have met a member of staff that would have been here, and that member of staff is then going to be assisting them onto the ride. So I think that's going to work out absolutely fine. So for the rest of the detailing then, I just need to put all of the foliage, and I need to start the process of painting the terrain and everything that's coming around here. I need to make sure that everything is as I want it. I think I'm going to put the mulch underneath here because it feels like this is an area that not much would grow. And it would be a bit of an overgrown, like unkempt area. You wouldn't make much of an effort because it's sort of underneath the pathway and everything, but you'd still want to make a little bit of an effort because it's still visible from path angle anyway. So I need to do the full TMTK pass as well, bins and benches, all of that sort of stuff. It needs ride signs and it needs everything sort of finishing off. So that's what I'm going to do, and I will see you when this is done. And just like that, Outlaw Fury is done and dusted, and it still amazes me just how everything pops to life when you start doing the detailing in the foliage phase. And I say that every single time, like, you work for hours and hours and hours and sometimes days on end and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, and it's not until you put those fine details into an area that everything just pops into life and it absolutely all starts to make sense. And that's exactly what's happened with this area again. And so I wanted to carry on this idea of this 90s B&M stand-up, stand-up, if depends on what your argument is going to be. And the idea that this park would have been competing with the likes of Alton Towers in the 90s, they wanted to make themselves space in the marketing world. And so Alton Towers back then would have been using slogans to sell their rides. So Oblivion, for example, had Don't Look Down, and Nemesis had Sit Back, It's Fright Time. Ripsaw had Can You Cut It? Submission had Hang In There. Hex, I think, still uses Legend of the Towers. And even to this day, Wickerman uses Be Chosen, or The Chosen Ones. So this park would have done exactly the same thing. In order to sort of cut itself into the market, it would have had the slogan Stand and Deliver. And actually it kind of, again, makes this area make a whole lot more sense, because you've got Outlaw Fury, you've got Stand and Deliver, and then you've also got Bandits over the other side as well. So it's giving sort of like this, it's lending itself to this idea of highwaymen and railway robberies and stuff. And so essentially what would happen is Stand and Deliver, they would rob the train, shout Stand and Deliver, and you hand over your belongings whilst being held at gunpoint. And so that's now started to bring the theme all together, and it's quite nice. And the park would have splashed this everywhere. So remember, the park would have spent a lot of money on marketing. They wouldn't necessarily have invested a lot of money in the area because this was still a gamble, right? So they would have had a big marketing budget, and this is what they're doing here, the Stand and Deliver. So it's everywhere on the ride, you know, it's almost overkill on the station walls, and it's also inside the station as well. You are just literally presented with this Stand and Deliver wherever possible. So with that in mind, give me your best standing puns in the comments. I want to know whether you can beat Stand and Deliver. So go on, that's your challenge. Best standing puns. So we'll not stand for it. Hey, should be a comedian. Anyway, let's have a look at the area. So here's the main skyline then. So I've been looking at the actual guest sightline and everything, and I've also considered some of the future and the present skyline. So I know that in the background here we're going to have something eventually, and this is going to fill in this blank space. So as a result, some of the stuff along this side here has also blank space because I want the ability to be able to see through it and see what's behind it. So I've kept that in there, and I've also toyed with this first drop. And I've used so many reference images, and to me it doesn't sit right as being a correctly shaped first drop, but actually it's the same shape as Green Lantern's is. And if you look at the shaping of Shockwave at Drayton Manor, that's even weirder. It's a double down, essentially. It goes down, levels out, and down again. So this is the correct shape. It's just, I think it's because I'm not used to building this kind of shape. I think that's why it's not sitting comfortably for me. It would come down, be level, and then come down again rather than going up and swooping down. I mean, it's offset banked and everything, so it's all correct, and it uses the same measurements and everything as Green Lanterns does. So it's there. It's as close as you're going to get. So anyway, this is the entrance area. So I wanted this idea of being presented with Outlaw Fury right in your face constantly with the stand and deliver slogan and everything. You're entering this whole western area. So it's there, you know, it beckons you in. It's all in front of you. And then I've also just added in the missing supports as well, just from the actual track itself. So that's now correct. And you walk into the area, and again, there's this negative space where you're going to be able to eventually look through whatever's at the back here and look through into the queue. And then you've just got all of your vending machines and everything on the right hand side, and the station is very dominating of the area. It is what it is. And again, you can see stand and deliver as the slogan many times. And there's that Western theme again. There's that whole thing. You come over to this side and you enter the queue. There's no doubt as to where you're going to enter the queue. You enter underneath the lift hill, and there's all of your signage that you need. And I've also just put the wheelchair access in as well. The wheelchair lift is now in. I've taken this actually from the Reel Up My Ride episode that I did with the Western Town Square. I've just made it appropriate for this station, so that's just there, and it actually sits quite nicely. It makes sense of this area in front of it. I always knew that this was going to come together eventually, but again, it was just feeling like it was a bit uncomfortable. But now it sort of makes sense. It's having a bit more sense, this space and this concrete padding that I had. So queue line is now all done. Bins and everything are in. I just need to do a little bit of tidying up before I make this actual steam ready. But the fencing, by the way, I didn't tell you before. I've taken it from the PCA coaster that I'm doing at the moment, the Timber Run coaster. So I've literally lifted this straight from the save file and put it in here because I felt it actually worked quite well on this coaster. It gives it like the right feel. And then you come into the main plaza area. So you've got this under the stairs bit, which is still quite overgrown. The park wouldn't make much of an effort with this. In fact, most parks would probably have walled this off to make it an actually enclosed space and probably used it for retail or some kind of games arcade or whatever. But for some reason, Reigate Lake has just decided to keep it as an open space, particularly as when you get to this sort of area, the British public would throw rubbish down there. It's going to happen. We're messy people, we're a messy nation. So I liked that idea actually, that you've got this ability that you can just throw the rubbish down, and maybe the park would come along and put some kind of fencing in, but people would still find a way of poking it through the fence. That's just what we do. We're disgusting humans. And then you've got the ride photo area is all here. So we've got now the photos in place, the staff, the floor, and everything's finished. And again, there's that stand and deliver. It's right in front of your face. But then the photo area has come together nicely. It feels like it should do, just like all of the other photo areas. I mean, there's nothing really different or special about this one. It's just the Western themes to the actual roller coaster itself. What I do quite like though is the guest sightline of the actual curve coming over the top here, just like that. Good timing. So I like that aspect. There's a bit of path interaction going on there. Now over at Bandits, I've finished this off, so I've changed some of the elements. I've just put the TMTK items all down just to give it its clutter and everything that you'd expect outside the front. And I've also just put out some kind of tables and chairs and everything for the area, just so you can see that this area now makes sense. It feels like the park would have wanted to subtly block this off in some way, but not make too much of an effort, because you still need to be able to clear the access quite quickly to be able to get vans and everything through to the maintenance area and shed and everything. And again, from this part, you've still got the sight line of the actual twist and the turn here. You've got the brake run, and you've also got some of the corkscrew as well. So this has turned out quite nicely as a sight line as it's coming round now. Look, so go round through the corkscrew and into the twist, into the turn. So it's good. I like it. And then I've also come along here. Fences have now got all signs and everything. I haven't gone down the right hand side. I don't know what's going to go down the back here. Need to consider what's going down there, because this is the back of the park. So need to start thinking seriously about what we're going to do. But I've now put all of the foliage and everything all along here, so this now makes sense. And I think I'm going to do an extra episode where I'm going to bring this whole area to life and put the train station in and get this ready for the Steam release. I think it feels like this area should be finished when it actually gets released. And I've also kept the foliage and everything quite simple down here because I wanted the sightline to focus on the first drop and the 0G roll and everything that we've got. So here the main focus is supposed to be on this, not on this tree. It's supposed to be on this element here. So you've got your first drop and then you come into the actual vertical loop and then you come into the 0G roll. So I wanted to keep this clear of trees and shrubberies to as much of an extent as I possibly can, because this is going to be the interesting point. This is going to be the bit that you're going to be looking at. And I also realised as well that I hadn't put the lampposts and everything in the queue line for Gold Rush, so I've actually gone along and actually fixed that and made that a thing. So is the train coming down the hill now. So this is the view that I sort of wanted to capture, and it comes into the vertical loop and then it goes into the 0G roll from behind. So you've got that nice little sight line going on. And then at the same time as well, at one point you've got the two rides next to each other. So you can either look to the left and you can see the stand-up coaster, or you can look to the right and you can see Gold Rush. So it's a bit of a mess of adrenaline that you've got going on here. And then it comes back into the main plaza area, and I like how this is now creating a bit of a loop. So when we're heading over to this side of the park, you've now got two ways that you can go. Particularly if it's busy, you can either come down past Gold Rush or you can go up past the stand-up coaster, and that makes sense for crowd control now. So I'm liking that this is sort of like a bit set back, but actually it's going to be on the main thoroughfare as well as this side as well. So it's coming together quite nicely. And then you've got the maintenance area, so just put the clutter and everything around. I've made sure that this does clear for a van, so you can still get a van into the actual maintenance area. And then everything in the maintenance area is now finished. So like I say, there's all of the windows and everything that I've put in just for vanity and everything, just to make sure that all makes sense. And then I've just finished off the fencing, made sure that everything is sufficiently cluttered, and I've just put all of the safety signs and everything in here as well, and made sure that all of the transfer track and everything all starts to make sense and it all works together. And so that's the area. That's everything that we've got in terms of the stand-up coaster. So it's quite a good little project actually. It's come through. So when we battle with the autosave, it's going to look good from the air. And it's also the actual area of the park now is starting to come together as well. So I need to start thinking about what's going over in the car park over on the right hand side, and I think it's going to be the hotel, and that's going to be a big project in its own right, because I want to do as much detail on the hotel as I can possibly put in. So we're dealing with rooms that are going to be rooms, and we're going to be dealing with restaurants that will have full on seating areas and full on decoration. So I think that's going to be probably a couple of episodes worth of content that we'll be able to pull together. So I'm going to save that for when it's appropriate to do that. I think we need to build some more of the theme park first. It needs to be a bit more of an established park before we can say, yeah, let's start having guests staying and everything. So that brings us pretty much to the end of the episode. And do you know, only 20% of you actually get to this part. So I've saved this part deliberately for you guys that are the ones that watch these videos until the absolute end. And I want to tell you how this is going to get released onto Steam, but you've got to keep this to yourself, because it serves the 80% right for clicking away from the video. So I'm going to put this onto Steam ready for Roller Coaster Day, and it's part of a bigger project that I can't really tell you much about right now. But it's going to go on there for Roller Coaster Day, so that's August the 16th. And as subscribers, you guys will see the video first. So I made a bit of a boo-boo a couple of weeks ago, but actually it gave me a bit of an idea. When I publish a video, it tells subscribers first, and then I then promote it through links and everything, through Facebook and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys as subscribers access first, because I'm going to publish the video and make it exclusive to you guys, and then you'll have the link that you can go on and download, and then I'll publish the video and make it all public. So watch out for that. I'll give you more details on how that's going to go, but it's August the 16th that this is going to go up on Steam, and it will be the full park. So it'll be everything that we've built here you'll be able to have access to. So all 8, well, possibly 9 episodes worth of stuff that you'll be able to see and pick apart and like have fun with, and build your own versions and rob the blueprints that you want for your own park and do what you need to do with it. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I say, if you do want to know when the next episodes are coming out, then you know what to do. Subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified. Please leave a comment or a like at the bottom. Absolutely love speaking to you guys. And don't forget about your standing puns. Got to stand and deliver. So, otherwise, guys, I'll speak to you very, very soon. Please look after yourselves, and I'll see you for the next episode. Let's go on a ride at this, shall we?